Thanks for staying with Sharaad and I on Consider This. Let's continue our conversation about ASEAN's response to COVID-19 following the emergency virtual summit held earlier today. Now, joining us on the line, we have Joel Mark Baysa-Barredo, Program Manager for SHAPE-C, which is the Strengthening Human Rights and Peace Research and Education in Southeast Asia program. Joel, good evening. Thank you for coming on the show tonight. Now,
thank you so much.
SHAPE-C had organized a webinar with Forum Asia yesterday regarding the status of human rights in Southeast Asia during the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, one of the observations shared was that many ASEAN governments are treating the pandemic as a security issue rather than a health and medical issue. Now, can you tell us the implications of this approach?
Definitely, I think the securitization of COVID-19, first and foremost, that the use of the military approach into solving the issue is something that is worrisome. It definitely, from a human rights perspective, does affect the way that people are able to access services and able to enjoy their freedoms in this time of crisis. It becomes a precedent, especially in these times and with political regimes that we have at the moment, that can definitely affect the way that human rights are being protected, especially if they're marginalized.
Joel, could you help us understand if this is a kind of across-the-board situation for the region, or does it actually vary in terms of country, in terms of their own either democratic institutions or lack of democratic institutions?
I think it's becoming a trend all throughout the region. It's very much telling of how governments have dealt with their societies, even pre-COVID. This is as well, I think, the restriction of movement. It's always, I see it as always a reaction to the pandemic. And this is very much a question of how the government views public health. Because if there is an emphasis towards public health, an inclusive public health system, then we don't need to resort to military means of dealing with the situation.
Joel, can I just ask you, to what extent do you think various national publics, different constituent groups actually think that it's okay, that they were happy to suspend some fundamental liberties, and primarily that of movement, because of the imperatives that the pandemic seems to have imposed on our societies? Is there buy-in by society?
There is definitely a buy-in by society because it has immediate effects on society. It tells you that, you know, when your movement is restricted, then you're able to contribute to the health of society. But then if you look at it at the long run, in the long term, it does affect other rights, your freedom of movement, especially those who cannot abide by the rules of this securitization of COVID-19. So it is really, really dangerous. And I think if this is not being, if there won't be a paradigm shift to a health-centered or a rights-based way of dealing with things, then then the people will suffer in the long run.
Right. Well, you know, Joel, we just spoke to Yuyun Wahyu Ningrum from AICHR just a few minutes ago, and she pointed out that human rights does not appear in the declaration from the meeting today. Does that concern you?
Definitely, and that's something that's very apparent in the declaration, in the outcome document a while ago. And I think also one thing is the mention of civil society that has been doing so much work in terms of helping out the people, in terms of disseminating information. That is also very much lacking in the outcome document.
Joel, to that particular issue, the question of media freedoms around the region, the media both used as a tool to disseminate propaganda, as it were, but also necessary in order to keep the credibility of data and so on. What are you seeing on a regional level?
Well, this information is very much apparent in these days. I mean, definitely in social media, you have people who consume information that's unverified. I've been receiving so much of that during these past days, and But I still believe that, that media has to be, number one, accountable with the information that they're sending out. At the same time, they need to also be vigilant in the way that they are reporting the news, because information is very much important at this point.
But unfortunately, in authoritarian regimes, there's limited transparency, and not questioning data is something that is expected and also practiced. Is that what you've also noticed?
Very much. The information that we are seeing at the moment is, a lot of us are skeptical about it. Perhaps some governments, some states would like to open their borders immediately so that they provide information that are quite attractive to the public. So it's something that we are very much skeptical about, but I think we need to really be, we need to make sure that the people who hold this information and disseminate this information are made accountable all the time.
Well, Joel, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, with me Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for this evening. Thank you so much for watching, folks, and good night.